And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge. I'm back once again with another instalment of my Ultimate New 52 reading guide. And to provide a bit of background, I have over the last few years read the entire New 52, that's 3,646 issues. And I've used that knowledge and experience to build the world's most comprehensive reading guide for the New 52 in the form of a map that I'm going through throughout this video. This series of videos is the result of going through that map, and I just want to thank you, loyal viewer, for tuning in. I've just uploaded 6 rather lengthy videos in the Batman family of comics and did so fully aware those are the only ones that some people care about. So if you have come back to continue watching this series, thank you very, very much. Today's video is video 6.1, Heroes. Now before we go any further, I am going to stress that even if you think that you know what the New 52 is, or even if you only want to read one specific character, like for example Batman, you still need to watch the introduction video for this series. That's video 0.0. And that video covers a lot of the broad concepts and themes that underlie the design of the map that I've created. And I'll use lots of technical terms during these videos that I introduce in the original video. Things like the convergence line or the forever evil line. So if you find all that a little bit confusing, I would really strongly recommend that you go back and you watch video 0.0. The link's going to be in the description below. Anyway, with no further ado, here is the Ultimate New 52 reading guide. Today's episode is 6.1, Heroes. Now, the hero section are basically the people that don't quite fit in anywhere else, but they're all, for want of a better term, good guys. And they're actually arranged between the 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock parts of the map. So if you zoom into Flashpoint here, which is the centre of the map, on our right we've got the Justice League stuff that we covered in video 2.1 to 2.3. And above us to the north, we've got all the Batman circles we've spent quite a lot of time going through. Well, the heroes are all these red circles here, slightly larger than average, just to make it a little bit easier on the eye to break things up. And today I'm going to be going through the heroes in this section of the map. The first person I'm starting with, and this is in no particular order, is going to be the second one along, and this is Aquaman. So, here we are. That's Aquaman that ran from 2011 to 2016. I believe this is technically volume 7 of Aquaman, and that's volume with a big V. So this series was published as 9 different collected editions during the New 52, and those are volumes with a little v. So we're going to dive through those, but before we start, just a few things that you need to know. Let's think. You don't really need to know anything, to be honest. Nothing specific. He's a water-powered superhero. That's it. In popular culture, he's always been considered a bit of a joke, so there's always things like the joke about the idea he talks to fish and so on. But this series really totally revitalises the character. In case you're wondering, this version of Aquaman in the comics here, blonde hair aside, this is actually what inspired the Jason Momoa Aquaman movie from 2018, which was a great movie. So looking at the map here, we've got Aquaman Volume 1, which is called The Trench. This collects issues 1 to 6. Available as both paperback and hardback, as are in fact all 9 volumes. So moving further along, this moves seamlessly to volume 2, The Others, which collects issues 7 to 13. That's this one here. This then moves seamlessly on, if we continue following that line up, to this volume here, which is volume 3, The Throne of Atlantis. Now this contains issues 14 to 16, issue 0, and Justice League issues 15 to 17. It's a tie-in with Justice League. Now, the more observant viewers amongst you will remember that this event ties in with that Justice League event that I talked about in video 2.1. And in that, I showed you the Justice League volume. I'll show it you again here. So if we just zoom out a little bit, and we just head down, this third volume here, oh, way too close. This third volume here is Justice League Throne of Atlantis. It's also got the same name as the Aquaman volume, so it's a little bit frustrating, especially given it collects slightly different issues. So anyway, let's move back up to Aquaman, and here we are. If you like this event, I am going to make clear you should be aware of the following fact. The best version to read is the one here in the Aquaman collection, the one I'm showing you right now. This is as it collects issue 0, which provides some really valuable context towards the Atlantean War. However, if you're collecting both series, you will inevitably need to buy both volumes with their identical names and slightly different contents. If you've been following my channel, you'll see that I actually got my 2 volumes combined into one single custom bind to avoid all the double dipping. And I'll link to that video in the description below, so if you're interested, just check that out. And then finally, after volume 3, Throne of Atlantis, if you follow that line all the way along to the Forever Evil line, just round about Forever Evil, we have volume 4, which is called Death of a King. Now, Death of a King collects issue 17 to 19 and 21 to 25. I'm going to discuss the issue 20 in a minute. But before I do, I just want to take a moment to reflect on these first 4 collections. They're all thematically and creatively linked. They're all one continuous story that I would strongly recommend you reading as one continuous story. They're all written by superstar writer Geoff Johns and form just one compelling, brilliant whole. They're excellent. In fact, as well as collecting them in 4 paperback or hardback volumes, DC also released them as a single omnibus, which is well worth picking up if you like that format. I'll put a link in the description below to a great review of the omnibus by the channel A Week in Geekdom, which I would strongly recommend you checking out if you're fans of characters like Aquaman, as Gio, the host of Week in Geekdom, is a real Aquaman fan and expert. So anyway, let's pan back a little bit and let's move along. And here we have volume 6. Oh no, we don't. This is volume 5. So volume 5 is called Sea of Storms. So Geoff Johns has left at this point, and this is now written by Jeff Parker and collects issues 26 to 31 and Swamp Thing issue 32 and Aquaman Annual 2. First things first, there's a noticeable drop in quality in terms of the storyline as far as I'm concerned. Secondly, it does have a tie into Swamp Thing. Don't worry about that. The Swamp Thing issue it collects here is the only thing you need to read there. So that's fine. Pretty forgettable, can't really recommend it. Moving on, we then have... What do we have next? We then have this volume here, just before the convergence line. So this is called Maelstrom, and actually this also contains, to an extent, some of the ideas used in the Aquaman movie. Unfortunately, this volume is quite mediocre. It collects issues 32 to 40. So at this point, we are now going to cross the convergence line, and when we cross the convergence line, we get to volume 7, which is called Exiled. That collects issues 41 to 48 and is just really not good. Just really not good. And then the final volume for this series, again, if we follow that line across, here we are. The final volume for this series is volume 8, Out of Darkness. I have to admit, I have an odd fondness for this particular volume. It might be the Brett Booth artwork, because I always love Brett Booth. It might just be some better writing by Dan Abnett, who I do have a soft spot for. Either way, I picked this up myself. It contains issues 49 to 52, meaning that I personally own volumes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8. Random, I know, but that's how I choose to collect things. And remember, I got volume 3 adjusted in a custom bind. So let's just zoom out and move on to the next hero. But hang on, wait, I hear you cry. Thomas, you said you were going to talk about that missing issue 20. Well, you're right, I am, I should, and I'm going to do it here. You'll notice that after Throne of Atlantis, I've got this weird line sticking out to this other weird bubble there. Now, this divergent line leads to the short-lived series Aquaman and the Others, which was released from 2014 to 2015. So before reading this, things you need to know are, again, nothing specifically for this series, but please do not, under any circumstances, get this confused with some of the later Green Arrow stories we're going to be looking at in a minute during this video. I know, that sounds like a really odd thing for me to warn you about, but just trust me, I ended up getting confused, and I just want to point out, this series, Aquaman and the Others, has nothing to do with Green Arrow. So, what we're looking at here is volume 1, it's called Legacy of Gold. This collects the missing issue of Aquaman from earlier, issue 20, and then also issues 1 to 5 of Aquaman and the Others, and then also Annual 1 of Aquaman. Now you probably didn't notice, but Annual 1 of Aquaman wasn't collected in the series we just talked about. Annual 2 was, but Annual 1 wasn't. So Annual 1 of Aquaman is actually collected here in Volume 1 Legacy of Gold, which is part of the Aquaman and the Other series. Alright, let's move along there and see what comes next. Well, what comes next is this volume, which is the second volume, called Alignment Earth, and that collects issues 6 to 11 and the Future's End one-shot for Aquaman and the Others, and for Aquaman as well. They're all collected here in Volume 2, Alignment Earth. And that is actually the end of the Aquaman and the Others series. Now, oddly enough, as well as being collected in paperback, Aquaman and the Others is also collected in hardcovers, which is normally kind of a badge of quality. I wouldn't say so. I didn't enjoy them at all. But, of course, please feel free to read them and make up your own mind now that you understand where they fit and what's in them. Alright, now let's zoom back and let's genuinely seriously look at a different series. So the next one along, we just checked out Aquaman there. Let's scroll down and check out Green Arrow. Okay, so let's center up the map a little bit. So, Green Arrow, this ran from 2011 to 2016, so the whole duration of the New 52. I think this is volume 4 with a big V. I think so, but I'm not 100% certain. Other things that you need to know before you jump into this, Green Arrow, he's a guy with a green bow and arrow, to be honest. It does help if you watch the Arrow TV series, but to be honest, you can go into this pretty cold. Good thing to keep in mind is the first 3 volumes kind of reflect the fact that DC really had no idea what to do with this character. They're written by J.T. Kroll, who was replaced by Keith Giffen and Dan Jurgens, and then replaced by Ann Nocenti. So the first few volumes I go through is going to come across a bit of a mess. The one we're looking at here, the first one, is Green Arrow Volume 1, that's volume with a small v, and it's called The Midas Touch. Contains issues 1 to 6. This is pretty terrible, to be honest. Second one is Volume 2, which is called Triple Threat. Contains issues 7 to 13, and actually it's astonishing it was released. I mean, it's not something that would be able to release in 2019 without setting social media ablaze and outrage. Not a good comic. And then moving on, we've got Volume 3, which is called Harrow, Harrow. Now this contains issues 14 to 16, and issue 0, and Justice League 8, and Savage Hawkman issue 14 as a tie-in. Like I often say, I tend to group these things together. You'll notice Savage Hawkman is just down here, so you can always link them together if you printed off this map at home. So that's what's in this volume of Green Arrow. It's basically a real mess of a volume, which is indicative of the fact that DC really had no idea what to do with this character. It's a mismatch of crossovers and cameos, and only highlights that without the historic relationship with both Black Canary and Green Lantern, which were major features of Green Arrow before the New 52, DC didn't really know what to do with him. It's readable as it stands, so don't panic about those tie-in issues, but also don't expect to enjoy them. So, that's the first 3 volumes of Green Arrow. It's not looking good. But let's track this line along, and you'll see that just before we get to Forever Evil, things change quite substantially. This dramatic change is because of the arrival of writer Jeff Lemire at issue 17. Now, hugely influenced by the surprise success of the thematically very different Arrow TV show, Lemire's story totally changed the tone and direction of this series to appeal to people who were fans of the TV show and then started looking for the comics. And this change was very much for the better. Volume 4, which we're looking at here, is actually called The Kill... zooming in too far. That's called The Kill Machine. It's the first collection of Jeff Lemire stories and contains issue 17 to 24 and issue 23.1, which, as memory serves, is the Count Vertigo Villains Month tie-in. Keep in mind, obviously, this is the Forever Evil line, so we're having the Villains event right now. Great volume, well worth checking out. Moving just past Forever Evil, we continue with Lemire's run into a volume called Volume 5, The Outsider's War, which collects issues 25 to 31. Now, you remember earlier I said not to get Green Arrow confused with Aquaman? Well, the only reason I say that is when I personally read it, I kept getting confused between the Outsiders in this series and the Others in Aquaman series. I kept thinking they were the same people. They're not, and it's actually painfully obvious that they're not. But I think it all just started to blur together in my head. So don't make the mistakes I made. Okay, let's follow that line further along. And we get up here. So this is volume 6. And volume 6 is called Broken. Broken collects issues 32 to 34 and the Future's End one-shots. Now, these 3 volumes, 4, 5 and 6, represent Lemire's entire run on the character, and are very, very good indeed. Even though they're not quite to my own taste, I can't fault them at all. I think they're great. It's a shame they're not available as hardcovers, but what can you do? Let's continue following this line across. And just before we get to the convergence line, we get volume 7. Volume 7 is called Kingdom, and it collects issues 35 to 40. As you hopefully have picked up by now, issue 40 is round about when convergence hits. Interestingly, Lemire was replaced by writers Andrew Kreisberg and Ben Sokolowski for these issues. The reason that's interesting is because Kreisberg is the executive producer of the Arrow TV show on CW, and Sokolowski serves as a writer for the same CW show. So it's interesting to get their take on it, after Lemire sort of jazzed it up a bit. Let's follow that line along, and we get to volume 8. Now at this point, I've got to be honest, those writers have gone now, and Ben Percy is now writing this. Volume 8 is called The Nightbirds. It collects issues 41 to 47, and it's okay. Let's continue on, and let's get to the very end. Ooh, it's quite a way away, isn't it? Okay, let's get to the very end. Here we are. Final circle on this line is Green Arrow Volume 9 Outbreak, which collects issues 48 to 52 and Green Arrow Annual 1. I'll be honest, these 3 volumes represent a little bit of a tailing off in terms of quality for the series. Whilst they're better than the first 3 volumes, which were really pretty bad, these last 3 are pretty forgettable. It's really the 3 in the centre that are worth checking out. Having said that, there's no hardcovers available in this, either as standard size or as omnibus, so whatever you check out, you're going to be checking out exclusively in paperback form. Alright, let's zoom out. Well, we've got a little bit of time left today, and given that I did tease him earlier just for a moment, why don't I just go into the series that I've got here in the map between Green Arrow and Wonder Woman, and this is Hawkman. As you can see here, there's only 2 volumes to Hawkman. So let's jump into it. So Hawkman ran from 2011 to 2013 before it got cancelled. What do you need to know before Hawkman? You need to know nothing. And I don't mean that as in it doesn't matter if you don't know anything. I mean you actually need to go out of your way to make sure that you know nothing. Hawkman has an incredibly confusing backstory. There's nothing else I can say. He's renowned for having a confusing backstory, and that is so true, it's unbelievable. I would recommend in no uncertain terms not to read up anything on a Hawkman before starting reading the series. Seriously, if you go to Wikipedia, there are 3 separate Wikipedia entries on this guy alone, each of which is several thousand words long. You're much better off going in cold and being uncluttered by a very complex set of unnecessary baggage. If you have seen some stuff about Hawkman from watching the television show Flash and subsequent Legends of Tomorrow, try to ignore it as best you can. Anyway, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's look at Volume 1. So Volume 1 here is called Darkness Rising, contains issues 1 to 8, and was written by Tony Daniel, who you might recognise from the Batman videos. And then Volume 2 here is called Wanted. It contains issues 9 to 20 and issue 0. Now, what you'll probably notice, because I mentioned it earlier, is that whilst one of these issues from this second volume here is collected in Green Arrow, the reverse does not hold true. That's because this crossover is pretty weak and pretty easy to understand from a Hawkman point of view without reading the Green Arrow issue. So don't worry about tracking that down as a single issue if you want. I've got to be honest, that second volume as a whole is an incoherent mess, with writing from Rob Liefeld, eventually then being replaced by Tom DeFalco. It's just not good. Having said that, in my personal opinion, neither of these volumes are very good or impactful. So let's zoom out a little bit there. As you can see, Savage Hawkman's in the early days of the New 52, so it's relatively near the centre of our map. And that hopefully gives you an idea of what we've been looking at today. Tomorrow we'll be dropping the video for Flash, for Wonder Woman, and for a couple of other incidental hero characters further out in the DC YOU era. Well, that's all for today. Tomorrow we'll be covering the rest of it, as I said. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, and share more widely. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on the New 52. Were the Batman videos enough? Are they all you really care about? Or are you finding this continuing series useful? Let me know, hit me up in the comments, or tweet me at @IamThomasJudge. As always, these videos are only possible thanks to supporting this channel by heading over to Amazon.com and picking up the first episode of my prose novel, No Gods or Kings. That's available for less than $1, and it's over 200 pages of content. You can see the cover on the screen right now. It's a series of interviews from a future where superpowers are real and the entire world has changed dramatically as a result. So imagine something like World War Z crossed with Watchmen. If you have Kindle Unlimited, the first volume is already completely free, but I would still really appreciate you downloading and reviewing it. So if you're interested in also downloading the map and infographic I've created for this video series, that's also available on the official website for the book, which is nogodsorkings.com. That's in the description below, so whilst you're there, why not pick up the first book and support the channel? Until next time, stay classy.